If you lost everything, could you make it through hell and back in one piece? The psychological toll that comes with losing everything you've ever cared about. Reliving past trauma so severe that your entire reality becomes different. Unsure whether the path you're taking is the correct one, or just another illusion. This is the story of Senua. This journey is a dark and grueling one, through a captivating landscape, and Senua is sacrificed by Ninja Theory. The main character has psychosis, and this creates an unreal gaming experience for the player. We get a first-hand look into how people with psychosis see and interpret the world around them. The game devs even had a neuroscientist come in for consultations about psychosis. This game handles mental health with a grace and respect that can sometimes be overlooked. Throughout the narrative, the main character is looked down upon for their visions, but her psychosis is ultimately a gift, not an affliction. Ninja Theory also uses binaural audio in this game. This is a unique style of recording that captures sound on both sides instead of one front-facing microphone. Recording audio in this way adds to the immersion.
Take the torch. It's too dark. Take it. This will help you. Careful.
The motion capturing also adds depth to each character's emotional state. When a character is in anguish, we can see it clearly on their face. These elements in tandem create an immersive psychological experience. When Senua has conflicting internal thoughts, we feel like we are inside their mind. The game's setting is breathtaking, and the narrative focuses on Norse mythology. Every element of this game has a meticulous attention to detail, even the title. Senua's story is important, both in gaming and in mental health awareness. But before we analyze the individual elements of the game, let's go over the plot. I'm Berry. If you like this content, like, subscribe, and share with your friends. It really does help with the growth of this channel, and I'd really appreciate it. The game opens with a haunting boat ride. This is the first time we are introduced to the main character, Senua. She is a warrior from Orkney, Scotland. Senua is on a journey to Helheim to recover Dilian's soul from Hela. Dilian was Senua's lover, but he was gruesomely murdered. So Senua travels with his severed head in the hopes that Hela can revive him. Helheim is the Norse version of Hel, and Hela is Loki's daughter, who is in charge of this dominion. As we travel, we are constantly bombarded with disturbing visuals and conflicting internal voices. Senua believes she is inflicted with a curse that allows her to see what others cannot. We also get to learn more about Norse mythology on lore stones spread throughout the land. Our old friend Druth narrates these stories along the way. He also gives Senua guidance and insight throughout her journey. Senua wants to get into Helheim, but to gain access, she must defeat two adversaries, Valravn and Sutur. Also, let me know down in the comments if you're Team Valravn or Team Sutur. On my journey, I fought Birdman, so let's start there. They are the master of illusions, and they constantly play tricks on Senua's mind. She must go through the gates to disperse these illusions. Senua has a hard time telling what's real when she traverses Valravn's domain. Eventually, she conquers the trials and defeats him. She also gets to interact with the image of her mother for the first time. This gives Senua a sense of relief, but comfort doesn't last long on the path to hell. Next, we get to fight Sutur, a fire giant with a massive blade. In his domain, we get to learn more about our deceased ally Druth. He was a scholar turned slave when the North invaded Scotland. Their religious zealotry ruined his life. They killed Druth's entire family, but he ran through the fire to escape this burning hellscape. He turned his back on the gods because of their cruelty, and decided to carve out his own path. When Senua enters this domain, she relives the trauma that her friend and the others endured. Her psychosis shows her all the people being burned alive. She eventually defeats Sutur, and now she can enter Helheim. Senua opens the gates to Helheim and proceeds across the bridge. Before running into Hela, she finds her old lover Dilian brutally executed. This takes a huge toll on Senua's confidence and mental health. She feels guilty because if she hadn't left, maybe Dilian would still be alive. On her way to Helheim, she is confronted by Hela. Senua is defeated in battle and almost dies in the process. However, in this interaction, we get to learn more about her character. For the first time, the darkness speaks directly to Senua. This negative internal voice does nothing but tear Senua's spirits down. Senua awakens and follows a man-shaped light she believes to be Dilian. Along the way, she has a flashback to her life with him. She learned how to fight and use a sword by watching him. They talk, and Dilian falls in love with her despite her psychosis. Senua feels warm and comfortable in his presence. When the flashback ends, she follows Dilian's light to an ancient tree with a sword in it. This legendary sword, named Grammar, is a weapon powerful enough to slay even the gods. Senua must embark on 4 trials to reforge the sword completely. In these trials, we learn more about her past. Her father Zinbal was a religious demagogue who tried to control Senua and her mother Galena. He abused Senua frequently and made her feel like the visions and hallucinations were her fault. She wanted to leave her group to find a solution to her psychosis, but Zinbal refused, so Senua left by force. After the sword is reforged, Senua has another vision. This one is the most demented yet. She sees blood and corpses everywhere. Hands are reaching out to try and grab Senua, but she traverses forward. In this vision, she realizes that her father killed her mother, Galena. Senua's mother also had psychosis, and the group decided she was cursed. Following Zimbal's guidance, the group executed Galena when Senua was only 5 years old. This trauma is potentially what started her visions. Senua is crushed by this realization, and traverses deeper into the pits of hell. She dropped Dillian's head by accident, and goes to recover it. There she faces her final battle before Hela against Grampur, Beast of Darkness. Senua begins to realize that her darkness spawns from her past involving her father. Zimbal explains that he punished her for betraying the gods, but he's only trying to justify his abuse. She confronts Hela, but she is defeated. She pleads with the gods to give her back Dillian or kill her. She is stabbed, and she sees Dillian in her dying thoughts. He tells her to let go of him, and Senua is offered a second chance by giving up on her one true love. Then we look off into the distance, and the voices in Senua's head tell her that her mind has changed. Instead of internalizing all the negative emotions associated with her darkness, she accepts them and finds peace. Now that we've gone over the plot, let's talk about specific elements of the game that stand out. One thing you have to give Ninja credit for is their attention to detail. Binaural audio really helps you get a grasp of Senua's mental health.
You squashed it, strangled it, flattened it. The curse cannot be undone.
All of the voices in Senua's head are voice acted by Melina Juergens. The fluctuations in her cadence and the recording style gives us a sense of multiple people talking. The range of emotions that she can convey from her voice alone is incredible.
Run! Get through it as quick as you can. The panic is here. What's that?
The supporting cast also give amazing voice acting performances. For example, Druth. His narration adds so much depth and meaning to the stories he tells. Nicholas Bolton sells you on the idea of his character, a scholar turned slave. Motion capture in this game is also second to none for its time. We get to see a variety of facial expressions that other games have a hard time emulating. Conveying these expressions right is of utmost importance to sell the idea to the player. Having a goofy facial expression during a serious scene can take people out of the journey entirely. Luckily, this is not the case for Senua's sacrifice. These elements also help to create a cohesive psychological experience. By perfecting all of these different elements, we get a better understanding of how Psychosis feels to those who experience it. Since we went over the plot and the captivating elements of the game design, let's talk about psychology. Just to be clear, I'm not a mental health expert. I'm just giving my perspective based on what I know about psychology. This topic is a hard one to cover because there are genuinely different perspectives regarding mental health. The more westernized view is generally that mental health issues are negative. These issues must be resolved to reach greater happiness. But in some other cultures, mental health is viewed very differently. For example, in some traditional African cultures, possession and being in touch with spirits is often thought of positively. In my opinion, Senua's perspective on mental health has more of an Eastern influence. Everyone besides Dillian, Galena, and Druth think that Senua is cursed. The game shows Rot to demonstrate this to the player, but the supporting characters don't view Senua's psychosis as a curse, rather a gift. The narrative also shows how psychosis can be helpful to build empathy in the game world. Senua can understand the pain that Druth felt. She relives the most traumatic elements of his past through the vision she has. I think this is a very respectful way to approach mental health, by highlighting the positive and negative elements of psychosis. The game world embodies mental health as well. Most of the game has a bleak, depressing setting, but once the darkest moments are over, we get a beautiful appreciation for the world around Senua. We get to experience the serenity of nature, signifying that Senua has some semblance of hope left inside. Another amazing perspective of the game is experiencing the point of view of someone who has psychosis. People with psychosis might see hallucinations or process information differently than someone without psychosis. It's important to remember that psychosis is a symptom, not an illness. Trauma and abuse are often the reason for it. So in Senua's case, we can see how her trauma manifested into her interpretation of reality. She's constantly doubting her abilities and strength because of how much her father abused her. We can hear the voices second-guessing themselves, constantly bickering about what to do next. These manifestations come to physical form in the way of darkness. Whenever Senua feels insecure, darkness takes over along with the inner voice of her father. She has visions of trauma or hears agonizing sounds. This can be a very similar lived experience to someone with psychosis. Gaming is a medium that is unique in this way. In a movie, we might understand what a character feels from an outsider's perspective, but in Senua's, we get first-hand experience, which adds to the immersion and also helps give us an understanding of a perspective outside of our own. As Senua progresses through the game, she eventually comes to terms with her loss of Dillian. She also accepts her mental health instead of thinking of it with a negative connotation. I think during this time period, this approach would probably be the most healthy way to cope with psychosis. It's also thematically consistent, since little was known about the brain until more recently. Accepting the voices and images as a gift would help Senua more than being upset about them. It's also a very powerful message about our perspectives surrounding mental health. Sometimes our negative perspectives on mental health issues can exacerbate our struggles. I used to have really bad depression, and my negative thoughts around my mental health only worsened my mental state. I felt guilty for feeling sad, even though I knew it was destructive. The same is also true for Senua until the climax of the plot. Senua's journey could be a representation of mental health struggles. This idea of loss and agony, manifesting itself into our lives, constantly eating away at us, making us question our choices and path going forward. But the only way forward is to head into the darkness. By reaching our inner darkness, we can create a new light. If we think about it in terms of Senua's journey, she traversed the world, constantly running from her darkness, willing to combat it when necessary, but ultimately afraid of the power it has over her. Once she confronts her past trauma by traveling into hell, suddenly she has a perspective shift. These voices in her head don't seem to be primarily antagonistic like they were in the past. Dillian's death and the death of her mother don't have the same hold on her life. She accepts her past and her mental health to ultimately become a stronger person. This is the story of Senua. Thanks for watching another one of my videos. I really appreciate it. I love games like Senua and Celeste that attempt to break down mental health. These games give us a new perspective and allow us to understand each other better. There can be lots of stigma around mental health, the idea that someone who has mental health struggles is lesser. I think gaming as a medium can help buck this trend. In Celeste, we can see how our mental health struggles ultimately make us a stronger person. Senua shows us the power of traumatic experiences, and why repressing these emotions can harm us in the long run. It's easy to feel otherized by our mental health, to feel like we are afflicted with rot when we feel depressed or anxious. But confronting our sadness and sorrows can help us grow and learn more about ourselves and one another. This is why these types of games are so important. Let me know down in the comments your thoughts about Senua or other games with a focus on mental health. I'd also love to hear from anyone if there are any other games you'd like me to break down that involve mental health. Thanks, have a good one.